Welcome, Lisa. Great to see you again.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Happy to be here. I'm loving the plants in your background. Makes me feel at home.
Yeah, I talk to them at least once a week when I water them. I should probably talk to them more, but at least once a week when I water them. That one's name is Letty and the other one's Flo, just so you know. Um, Probably should never have revealed this, but now I'm going to get a lot of flack on that one. But so last time we met, like in person, was in Oxford at school at the Gender Smart Investing great session there, and God darn, it's been too long.
Yeah, I know. Long time is over a year. And what an important event school is, bringing people from all different parts of systems change together to exchange. So it was fun to meet you there.
Yeah, no, it was great. One of my clients has a great line. He said about 2020, the year has flown by slowly.
That's really true. That's really, really true. Yeah, it's been a great year in a lot of ways for me, in a nightmarish world for a lot of people. So I'm trying to count my blessings all the time.
Yeah, we do have to be grateful, and from breakdown comes opportunity. That's, if we don't learn from it, it was really a disaster. So let's make, as we say, let's make 2021 the year to really remember. That should be
really remember. Yeah, it's great.
So how about if we start by, if you could just briefly introduce yourself and then we'll chat.
Sure. Yeah. So nice to see you, Mark, and everyone listening around the world. I'm Lisa Witter. I'm talking to you here from Berlin, Germany. By my accent, I may not sound like a German because I'm not. I'm an American who's been living here for about 9 years now, and I think of myself as a real global citizen. If I had a phrase to describe myself, it's really as a political or policy entrepreneur. I've always seen politics and policy as a path to making things better for people at scale. So I've always been in that space at the intersection of entrepreneurship and politics and policy. And I most recently co-founded a company called Apolitical. It's a global peer-to-peer learning platform for people in government, used by 120,000 members in 170 countries. And I've just peeled off, even Mark, since we've last talked, to be the CEO of our foundation, which is focused on revitalizing democracy by building better politics. So happy to talk more about that, but really, really excited to bring that entrepreneurship and politics together in my life.
Yeah, I love that combination. Tell us a little bit about you, the family, and a little bit about that.
Well, my background, it's important because it kind of starts off with policy. It actually starts off with my mom went into labor with me at a demolition derby on the 4th of July, where my uncle had a car. So my mom always says I entered the world with a bang and have been banging along ever since. So I'll own that. For my 40th birthday, I'm 47. The whole family went back there and watched the demolition derby. In fact, later on in my life, I ended up working in a pit crew. I was the only person in my pit crew studying for the SATs at the time in high school. My boyfriend was a race car driver and a bodybuilder, but so I went on to college and they went on to the circuit. But I've always felt a lot about my life of building bridges between different parts of people, people working in pit crews all the way to people sitting at the World Economic Forum in Davos. I've always really loved that. So being born in 1973, it's an important year because it's the year Title IX came into effect. And for people who follow American policy and politics or gender, Billie Jean King was a big advocate of Title IX, as were others. What that allowed was, this is what I love about policy and politics, you can have really boring sounding topics that lead to really impactful things in people's life. And that said, hey, if you want money from the federal government, girls and boys have to have equal access to sports. So I didn't know it, but I became, a big sport person, partially because of that. My nickname was Animal. I played volleyball, basketball, softball, soccer, hence a bit my love for ice hockey, Mark. I know you're an ice hockey player, but I kind of like those hard sort of contact, but also team sports, about this camaraderie, about doing things together and being there for each other. And fans and performance and pressure and strategy and all of that stuff. But I also went to church every Sunday with my grandmother. I'm not religious now, but it's really grounded me in my sense of service and sense of being part of something bigger than myself in an era where I think God is capitalism, as we're becoming less religious in many places around the world. So if you love winning, that's what you do in politics. And that's what you do in sports, and you love helping people. Politics is the obvious path. And being who I am, I got very interested in why the good ideas and good people weren't winning. So went deep into understanding brain and behavioral science and how to apply that to politics. And also being who I am, accidentally heard about this word entrepreneurship, which is basically like solving problems through some sort of business model, or in new ways. So that's basically what I am, a lifetime political entrepreneur that has done a lot of different work in that space, but very grounded in people, and the love of winning for the right reasons.
I can see the connecting the dots in the thread. So born in a demolition derby, married pro hockey player.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
tell us about, you have kids?
Yeah, very important part of my life. I have two boys, Bruno and Otto, 13 and 11. I know a lot of people have found parenting, working in the time of COVID really hard. I'm really lucky that my kids are the age they are, and they are who they are, and I hope we've influenced them in some way. They've really taken this as for most part, a great opportunity, and are very independent, and at a really cool international school that was wired. So as a family, we've had extraordinary time together. We have a barn about an hour and a half north of Berlin. And so as a family, we've been doing it's so big, this barn. We have a half basketball court. So I play a lot of hoops with the boys. We turned our back fields into ice hockey for the community and spending a lot of time. Yeah, and we pressed 125 liters of our own apples this year. So really, really connected with nature during COVID in deeper ways than I had ever had time for. And we've done that as a family. They, like a lot of kids these days, are definitely the drugs of tech have brought them wanting to be on Fortnite and wanting to play those games. But we're trying to sort of pull them out of that by giving them time in nature. One of their friends came to visit us, and she got out of the car and she looked around and she's, wow, this is so offline. I think it's such an interesting sort of way, right? I didn't grow up like that. I grew up not having all of that. So these kids are growing up very differently, and it's providing parenting and leadership challenges, I think, for a lot of people these days.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's interesting you talk about being outside. One of the best cures against COVID is being outside.
Yeah.
And we need, they should have brought people in nursing homes outside as much as possible. And I remember certainly growing up, we didn't have the tech either. But so what did we do? We were outside playing all the time on the rink till dusk to dawn, until mom's yelling, it's time for dinner, and things of that nature. So my printer is going off. It has a mind of its own today. But I love the story about, hang on. I love the story about the outdoor skating, obviously, because that brings home with me to Montreal, and you've kind of answered the question of why you do what you do. So I'm gonna move a little bit forward here, where we've all seen that it's taken decades. I personally have been through those. It's taken decades for corporate leaders, even family offices, to realize that aligning with purpose, aligning with social environmental impact, is actually not only really important for attracting talent, especially now, who make decisions based on that, but it's also really good, for business. And I like the way you describe it. You're kind of leading the way with an unconventional and passionate, nonpartisan program, is what you're doing, and for transformational leadership and public purpose. So public servants and politicians and leaders who care. A lot of times people wouldn't necessarily put the politicians into the leaders who care aspect, but why not? Why can't we have that, where the politicians are leaders who care? And I wanted to ask you, how did you find yourself in the past and now bringing these values and skill sets forward, bringing this mindset forward as you advanced in your career as a woman as well, bringing them forward to to transform and differentiate not only yourself, but the people around you?
Yeah. Well, first, one of the things that we need to heal, fix, advance systems is better political leadership. But we can't have better political leadership, Mark, until we believe that it's possible. So one of the things I'm quite obsessed with leadership is not just learning, but unlearning. And there's a meme, our kids would call it. There's a meme out in the world that all politicians suck. And that politicians are the problem. And every time we swallow that pill of cynicism, we kind of get what we deserve, because it is the way we do representative democracy. So I'm really pushing people who think about wanting to make the world a better place. If they don't think about political leadership and have hope for political leadership and be realistic about it, then we're all screwed. And more we need businesses and philanthropy going upstream, right? To think about, okay, you may want a well or to end female genital cutting or to end racism, but you need to have that upstream political leadership. And you've seen this in the time of COVID, right? The difference between, effective political leadership and non-effective political leadership is one of the reasons I actually moved from the company over to the foundation to double down on political leadership, is because you can see that. And I have a lot of empathy for politicians. Imagine making life and death decisions every day while people hate you and threaten your life. And women politicians are threatened. My own leadership journey started pretty young, and it started where leadership often starts for some people, and that's with tragedy. As a kid growing up in America, no one will be surprised that gun violence didn't sort of shock my community. I grew up in a kind of, suburban, on the edge of rural place where everyone had guns, including my dad. My dad had a gun room and it was locked up, but kids had access to guns that shouldn't at the wrong times. And there were a lot of gun deaths, Russian roulette, killing of their parents, accidental shootings, suicides. And so I was picked, I think, because I've always been a bridge builder. Just I'm kind of I have friends in lots of different pockets. I loved learning. So I took really advanced classes, but I also was the jock. So I also hung out with them. And I kind of was in all of these spaces. And so they picked these people called natural helpers when I was young, which is basically like to deeply listen and to be early warning systems, canaries for kids who had needs. So I started, I went away in a retreat before I knew it, talking about how to end suicides and gun deaths when I was in middle school. And fast forward, one of my first jobs out of college was to work at a leadership training institute at the Greater Seattle Chamber of Commerce. I'm from the Northwest, sitting next to Bill Gates' dad. And what we did was brought together the private sector with the public sector and the nonprofit sector to solve problems. And that was before we were talking about public-private partnership, but to really build this, I think you call your work omni wins, like these omni wins between the community. So I learned, how to be a leader and all of that at a really young age, right? Like building and seeing that in a really beautiful orchestra of change. I don't think it's an accident that Seattle does as well. It's not a perfect place. We have lots of problems, but there's a lot of good things that have come out of Seattle, right. Bill Gates and philanthropy. And at the time, the other thing that I'll say is that I got really frustrated that political leadership wasn't what it needed to be. It was about training people to get elected, and it wasn't saying, why are you running, right? And then how do you get people who are diverse into the system, how to kiss the ring to get in, and then actually how do you do policy? So my journey has started really young, and it continues every day to learn how to do this work better.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I knew a fellow who was the chief of staff for the Air Force. His name was General Norton Schwartz, and I became friends with him. He actually told me to ask him. He asked me to call him Norty, and I said, "Norty, Colonel, General. I don't know if I can call you Norty." And but bottom line, he was working after that in trying to bring it easier for business people who did care to get into politics, and not make it so hard that anything they ever did is going to be attacked and their family is going to be attacked because they knew Joe in some country somewhere. Yeah. And so I really get that. And I never understood why the word politics had to be negative when it could actually be a positive thing. Politics, if you play properly, not to sound naive, but if you play properly. So I love that aspect, and I'd love to tie it into somewhat of well-being. You know, my grandparents were from Kiev, and they would always say, and I'm sure your grandparents too, like the most important thing is you have your health. That was like the thing, and then there's education, but health was, and it wasn't a brand, it wasn't a slogan, it wasn't a quick, it was like in their life for real. And so with that said, you know, we have COVID, we have tech changes at the speed of light still. We've got everything from wildfires, we've got racial injustice, social injustice, tipping point, finally. You know, Mother Nature's not a happy camper, or whatever you want to call it, everything at the same time. So with respect to that, do you think there's been, for lack of a better word, an awakening among everybody, including politicians and maybe even people that want to get into politics, as to what are our values and what is really important?
I really want to answer yes, Mark. I really want to say that. My answer is I hope so, but I'm not sure. I don't think we're at the point where we're going to build back better yet. I really don't think so. Partially just looking at history, like during times of history when things like this have happened, what's really fundamentally and structurally changed. What I can say that I do see happening, and this was before COVID, is that the wisest people I know are beginning to realize that you can't lead on empty. What that means is there's two forms of empty. One empty is like you're just so exhausted that you don't have high executive function. So I study a lot sort of brain and behavioral science. And if you're not sleeping and you're not eating right, then you're not making good decisions, you're not showing up right. So this notion of a leader as the most exhausted or the hardest working one versus the smartest working one, I'm seeing that change a bit. That's a lot coming from an American whose nickname was Animal and like has learned like I was the little engine that could. That's been my way. So I've had to really learn that sleeping and all of these things is important. And that sounds soft, right? But it is like really important executive function. The second, and I think, by the way, that's probably one of the reasons why COVID response is kind of challenged in a lot of places, is that political and public service leaders are exhausted. To be in crisis for this long is really hard. You're going to make a bad decision. We all know that. There's all the science on that. But I'd say the thing that I see, and this is where I went to University of California, Santa Cruz, so I can sound a little hippie, but it comes from a place of science itself too, is that I've done this exercise with myself a lot and I'm growing, but to be self-satisfied with nothing or very little, you know, to sit under a tree. I'm sitting here in Berlin. This is the you know, talk about the Holocaust and concentration camps. I walk through the streets and there's these things called stumble stones, if anyone's been here, and you literally walk over and look at in front of this house, this person's body alive was taken out, and they were taken and exterminated in camps, gay, disabled, obviously, you know, the Jews. I live next to a Jewish school. So I think about, I'm really drawn to darkness because in the darkness you can see the light. And I'm really drawn by people who tell stories of surviving the Holocaust, being in concentration camps, finding peace and joy inside of themselves in these moments, right? Not looking for externalities. Now, I'm not saying this is what we should be looking for, is to go to hell to find light, but I'm seeing the best political leaders I'm seeing going deep into that place and leading from that place of fullness versus leading from that place of emptiness. And that's what we do in our political training programs. We don't talk so hippie about it. I mean, it's that, but it's like, you've got to work on yourself in order to lead. And you've got to lead for the right reasons. You know, just yesterday we saw Sarkozy. This is, you know, March 2nd, we saw him given a jail sentence. He'll do it at home. I don't know all the details, and I'm not even, you know, passing judgment on that. But what I do know, if you're looking to fill yourself with externalities, it's not going to be full. It's got to come from this place of service leadership. That first program I was telling you about, I worked at the Greater Seattle Chamber of Commerce. There was a saying, this was Robert Greenleaf, kind of a leadership guru, and really impacted me. And he said, real leaders plant shade trees under which they will never sit. And that's the sort of, you know, I'm asking this deep question doing research now. What does it mean to be a 21st century or 22nd century political leader? 22nd century political leaders, and that's the sort of thinking we need for climate change. We need it for now, we need it for the future. That's the sort of political leaders I'm interested in, is like going in, taking care of themselves, and then leading from that place and leading to plant trees, which they will never say. And I know them, Mark, they are there. They're sitting in the US Congress, they're mayors of places, they're, you know, in Belarus, they're in Germany. There are these people. And one of my missions is to find people who want to tell those stories and lift up those voices to be involved in politics in that way.
Yeah, I love that. You know, you're so right on, and being in leadership development and talent and whatnot, you know, for years. I mean, I've seen a lot of great leaders, and I've seen a lot of what I call sucky leaders. But it's not soft anymore, to use that term you used, to feel that way. It's not soft anymore to be vulnerable. I had a leader the other day saying, I'm experiencing the easiest, best time as a leader because I don't now have to pretend I know everything anymore.
Yeah.
It's actually easier to be a leader doing that. And for some reason, you know, there's no crying in baseball or that type of thing, you know, or men can't eat quiche, or, you know, all sorts of things, men, women, whatever. And I think we can find, and that's one of the things we're doing, is leaders who care. And because even when I trademarked that term, leaders who care, I had people saying that's a little soft, that's a little intimate. I mean, and I would go back to them saying, if this is really bothering you, what are you going to do when I start using the word love? You're going to go crazy. And so there's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, there's everything right about it. I think what you're talking about, and it is wonderful to see, you know, leaders, in business leaders and political leaders who care, because that's going to be the strongest thing ever. And there's going to be, which we found, they're going to want to hire and work with and partner with other leaders who care, and vice versa. And that can change things. So if I segue that into a little bit, and this, you know, this reminds me of, I'm in LA, and we can probably go talking for hours, but in LA, it's, you leave them wanting more because you want a sequel. I think there'll have to be a sequel to this. So, but how do you feel business leaders who care, what their role should be in the sense of participating in politics one way or another, whether it's elected or not, but also ensuring that they care about the financial, the physical, and the mental well-being of the people that they work with?
Yeah, it's a great question, and very excited and happy for that sequel. Should you want it, because I've got a lot of questions for you on something on leadership, which is around how do you blend the tsunami of data and the love of data driving decision making in companies now with you know, instinct and gut and caring. And I'm really seeing, it could be a you know, I love Daft Punk. I don't know if anyone knows Daft Punk, but it's like kind of synthesis music with great art. And I'm hoping that leadership is kind of Daft Punk. You know, it brings together the data and the synthesis with that sort of, can't put your finger on why that music is the way it is. So anyway, I think there's a lot of interesting discussions to have around the role of data. And, you know, I read Yuval Harari and Bergman and all of these folks, you know, collaboration and what AI is going to do. So it's a fascinating time to be a leader right now. This question you ask, I think, is a fundamental question, and one for American viewers or anyone who's watched, not just since the election this year, but even the years before. I think business leaders are beginning to understand that if they don't stand up for democracy, democracy may fall. I mean, literally, it is under attack. And we know that the cost of bad political leadership is bad for business, which means it's bad for everyone. Just to give you an example, I've been trying to put a number on this. I'm working on some stuff. But whenever there's been a populist leader, whether on the left or right, all over the country, there's some political science that have mapped that you see that there's a 15-point decrease in GDP for the next 15 years, sort of by, if so it's not good for the economy, number one, and it's not good for people. Now, the dirty little thing that I have to say is that there's been research done that about 40% of people like authoritarians, like they like to be told what to do. So this is really complicated stuff we have to deal with. I am personally working, and this is a call out to anyone listening, on how to build empathy in the business community for government and politics. We run something called the Business Leader Boot Camp on government, which is basically, because I get these questions all the time, like, how do I understand how government works? How do I not dislike them? Particularly Americans have been taught that government should be so small, you should flush it down the toilet. Is that really good operating environment for our businesses and our communities? So I have a boot camp that I've put together to really help people in business understand how they can strengthen democracy, which, by the way, their employees want to be engaged. We're doing a big thing this year called Democracy Day to get businesses and get people all focused on like recertifying their civics, about what it means to be a citizen, and how to be an effective member in a democratic system. And I will say, Mark, if we don't, we're screwed. I don't want to go to there may be a better form of governance besides democracy, but we don't know what that is yet. So I'm happy to innovate and make things better, but I definitely am not ready to give up our rights. So yeah, it's a big question, something we're working on.
Yeah, and it's a great question, and it does affect the well-being of every single person, out there. And it's a matter to some degree also of raising people's self-esteem, that they don't have to count on somebody telling them what to do. It is easier having somebody tell you what to do, but it's not necessarily better to have somebody tell you. And it's got to be an embracing of the opportunity of I can be who I want to be, basically, and not be thinking that someone telling me what to do is better for me. So it's we definitely have to have the sequel. This is not even LA. We have to have the sequel on that conversation. One little last question on this part. 2020 passed now into 2021. As I said, we like to call it, let's make 2021 the year to really remember. What are you most grateful for as we're into 2021?
I'm grateful for so many things, and I have such a practice on that. I'm grateful for all the hugs I've gotten in the last year from my little fuzzy boys and our golden doodle Bowie and my husband. I like many people who are kind of hard charging, wanting to change the world, hopefully not from empty but from full. Normally don't get this much. And I crave it, and I grow taller because of it. And I don't need to be taller, but I just feel like my back's straighter. I purposely, Mark, wore these giraffes today for our interview because I find them such a good symbol of the type of leadership that I'm interested in. It's like, it's in this growing taller, there's this grace. I'm always fighting to have more grace. I can be a bit of a bulldog. I think I've spent my early leadership as a lion or a bulldog, and going into sort of grace, but still being strong and having, this foresight and maybe leading from the back. I'm trying to learn how to do that a little bit more, but the hugs, the physical hugs of what I've really loved.
Sounds like there's a doggy looking for a hug.
Yes, it's Bowie. It's Bowie. He'll come in a minute. Yeah.
So no, that's great, and I really appreciate you sharing. And I'm actually serious. I think we do need to have a sequel. So thanks for joining us on the Leaders Who Care series.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Stay in touch and be positive about politics. If you look for darkness, you find it. Just look for the darkness and the light in politics, and I'll be helping shine the light on that with you and for you.
Sounds great. Thanks.